on the night of May 31, 1984.
Inside one of the most heavily secured prisons in the U.S. state of Virginia, everything seemed normal. Guards were carrying out their routine duties. Inmates were locked inside their cells.
Digi transcription. Guards on duty. Guards on duty. Inmates in cells.
And nothing suggested that the coming hours would go down in history as one of the most dangerous prison escapes the United States had ever seen. I'm Joker, and tonight, we're going behind the mask. That night, the guard at the outer gate received an urgent phone call from the prison supervisor. His voice was sharp and tense. He said there was a bomb inside Building 1, specifically in Section C, the unit that housed death row inmates. The order was clear and direct. Open the gates immediately. Allow a van to enter the prison and move it as quickly as possible to the location of the bomb. The prison was surrounded by heavy security fencing, and its main entrance consisted of 2 consecutive gates, one outer gate and one inner gate, with a secured area between them. Prison regulations strictly prohibited opening both gates at the same time under any circumstances. This rule existed to prevent escapes or forced entry, but this time they were dealing with a bomb, a threat that could kill dozens. The guard hesitated for a moment, then followed the order.
Open the gates immediately.
He opened both gates at once, violating protocol, and allowed the van to enter the prison.
The van rolled inside.
The vehicle drove straight toward Building 1. Minutes later, 6 individuals stepped out, wearing heavy protective suits, helmets, and body armor. They moved with confidence and precision, like a professional bomb disposal unit. One of them carried a fire extinguisher, spraying something covered by a blanket, as if trying to cool it down or prevent an explosion.
6 men stepped out.
They shouted at the guards to stay back, warning them that the bomb was unstable. They loaded the bomb into the van, slammed the door shut, and immediately drove toward the main exit, which was still open. Within minutes, the vehicle left the prison and disappeared into the night. The guards exhaled in relief. The danger was gone. The bomb was gone. Everyone was safe. But what no one realized at that moment was that what had just left the prison was not a bomb squad. It was 6 inmates. These 6 men were not ordinary prisoners. They were all on death row, violent criminals, some of them serial killers, with nothing left to lose. And now they were free. At that moment, 6 of the most dangerous men in America had escaped, ready to do anything to stay out of a cage. Now you might be wondering, how did they build a fake bomb? How did they get out of locked cells? How did they get guards' uniforms? And how did they just walk out the front door? The answers lie in a plan so patient, so cunning. It unfolded over months, right under everyone's noses.
Transcription. Oh man, that's a good one.
Our story takes place in Virginia, inside Mecklenburg Correctional Center, a maximum security prison known for housing the worst of the worst. Within its walls was a special wing, Cell Block C, reserved for inmates sentenced to death. That's where it all began. The date was May 31st, 1984, at 11 p.m. The moment the escape was discovered, all hell broke loose. Police departments, investigators, state agencies, all were alerted instantly. Officials asleep in their beds were awakened. This was the first time in U.S. history that death row inmates had broken out of prison.
The entire state of Virginia went into lockdown. Police, federal investigators, the governor's office.
6 convicted killers were on the loose. There was no room for hesitation. Search operations launched immediately. Helicopters filled the sky. Police flooded the roads. Ca-9 units swept the perimeter. The land around the prison was sealed, inch by inch, mile by mile. The state police, the National Guard, the FBI's best investigators all converged. Everyone knew one terrible truth. If any civilian crossed paths with these men, the outcome would be fatal. These were not ordinary criminals. They were men already sentenced to die, men with nothing left to lose. When investigators arrived at the prison, the warden met them, pale and shaken. He described what he had seen. Inside cell block C, the scene was chaos. The area was trashed. Guards had been tied up, locked in storage rooms and cells. The inmates had taken full control. When investigators asked who had escaped, the answer was a chilling roll call, all 6. And among them, the Briley brothers. James and Linwood Briley. Serial killers responsible for 11 to 20 murders. Men who had slaughtered entire families. Women, children, no one spared. And now they were free. James Briley's crimes were especially brutal. He once assaulted a woman in front of her husband and their 5-year-old child, then murdered the entire family, including the little boy. The 3rd inmate was Earl Clanton. He had murdered an elderly woman. While out on parole awaiting sentencing, he killed again, this time a school librarian, stabbed 8 times in the head, then strangled with her own belt. The 4th, Lemuel Evans. He murdered 2 elderly women, both over 60. The 5th, Derek Peterson. He robbed a supermarket of $6,000, then executed the store manager. The 6th, Willie Jones. He broke into an elderly couple's home, killed the husband, forced the wife to pray, then murdered her too. Afterward, he burned the house down. Now you understand just how dangerous these 6 were, and why authorities were terrified. The lead investigator was confident they'd be caught, but his greatest fear was how many innocent people would be hurt or killed before then, because these men had nothing to lose. The moment the escape was confirmed, every law enforcement agency shifted into emergency mode. Police across Virginia mobilized, roadblocks materialized, highways were monitored. The search radius expanded hour by hour. The longer the fugitives stayed free, the farther they could run. Helicopters buzzed overhead. K-9 units tracked through woods and fields. State troopers, local police, federal agents all hunting. Meanwhile, investigators rushed back into the prison itself. Cell block C was a wreck. Guards, now freed, were shaken, some bruised, all traumatized. Investigators began questioning them immediately. Had the inmates said anything, hinted at a plan, mentioned a destination? The guards insisted they'd heard nothing, but the investigators weren't convinced. An escape this elaborate required inside help, or at least inside manipulation. They knew the guards worked long hours for low pay, under constant pressure. Someone could have been coerced, manipulated, or simply negligent, so they began reconstructing the timeline. 2 months earlier, an anonymous letter had arrived at the state prosecutor's office. It warned that a bomb was being built inside cell block C, and that inmates were planning an escape. Because of that letter, prison officials ordered surprise searches. Cells were torn apart. Inmates strip searched. Dogs brought in. Nothing was found. No bomb, no weapons. But the letter also mentioned something else. The escape would involve stealing guards' uniforms. At the time, Investigators dismissed it as a false alarm. What they didn't realize was that the letter itself was part of the plan. The prisoners had written it. They wanted the guards to believe a bomb threat was possible, so that later when a bomb actually appeared, it would be completely believable. On the day of the escape, the prisoners were in the yard for recreation. 5 guards watched them. 2 inmates, one of them Willie Turner, approached a guard. One said he'd hurt his knee. The other said he needed to use the bathroom. Normally, if anyone returned early, the whole group had to go back together. But the guards broke protocol. 2 guards escorted the inmates back inside, leaving only 3 outside. That small gap in supervision was all the prisoners needed. Later, when recreation ended, the remaining inmates were escorted back toward the cell block. As they entered the building, the guards were distracted. That's when one inmate slipped away. Earl Clanton ducked into a staff-only bathroom and locked the door from the inside. His job was to wait. The guards didn't notice he was missing. When one tried the door later, it wouldn't open. He assumed it was just stuck. Another violation of protocol. No maintenance called. No alarm raised. The trap was set. Cell block C was divided into 2 sections, separated by a control room where a guard operated the electronic doors. As prisoners were moved inside, the guards failed to count them properly, another fatal mistake. The inmates knew this. They knew the guards were careless. They knew the system was weak, and now everything was in place. Earl Clanton waited in the bathroom. Outside, the guards relaxed. The countdown had begun. Cell block C was divided into 2 sections, separated by a control room where a guard operated the electronic doors. The escape plan activated when an inmate knocked on his cell window. He told the guard he wanted to pass a book to James Briley in the other section. The guard agreed. He left the control room to take the book and made a critical mistake. He didn't close the control room door completely. It was a habit, one he'd done before. But this time, it cost him everything. The inmates saw it immediately. Inside the cells, they were ready. Willie Turner, skilled with his hands, had crafted weapons from metal scraps, bed frames, broken fixtures. He'd sharpened makeshift knives and hidden them in books, tables, walls. Investigators later believed Turner was the true mastermind. He distributed the weapons and told them all to get ready. When the guard returned with the book and handed it to James Briley, James raised his voice.
Thanks for the book.
Thanks for the book. That was the signal. The moment those words were spoken, Earl Clanton burst from the bathroom and rushed into the open control room. He slammed the button that opened all the cell doors. Chaos exploded. Cells flew open. Inmates rushed out. Weapons appeared. Guards were overwhelmed in seconds. The prisoners had full control of cell block C. They tied up the guards, stripped them of uniforms, weapons, and keys, and locked them in cells. Now the prisoners were in charge. Next, they needed access to the rest of the prison. They forced one guard to call a senior officer, a lieutenant, and report an emergency in cell block C. When the lieutenant arrived, he walked straight into a trap. They overpowered him, tied him up, and took his uniform. Now they had a ranking officer's identity. Using his authority, they began calling other guards, pretending to be supervisors. One by one, guards were lured in, disarmed, and locked up. Even a female nurse assigned to the unit was captured. At one point, an inmate tried to assault her, but another prisoner intervened and stopped him. The nurse later confirmed this during questioning. By now, the inmates controlled the entire cell block. The only remaining obstacle was the main prison gate. The gate control room was in a separate building, isolated. The only way in was through an officer already inside. Using the lieutenant's authority, They ordered the gate officer to open the main gates and bring a prison van to the building, claiming there was a bomb emergency. Because of the earlier bomb warning, the story was believable. The guard obeyed. A van was brought to the building. The prisoners dressed in riot gear and helmets. They took a television set, wrapped it in a blanket to look like a bomb, and prepared to leave. The gate guard saw what appeared to be a bomb disposal team. He never questioned it. The inmates loaded the bomb into the van, ordered the guard to back away, and drove straight out through the open gates. Just like that, they were gone. Investigators later concluded the escape wasn't about corruption or bribery. It was human error, ignored procedures, underestimation. By the time authorities realized what happened, the 6 men were already miles away. Search operations expanded, but hours had passed. Somewhere on the open road, 6 of America's most dangerous criminals were free. An hour after the escape, the news hadn't spread. Police officer saw the prison van and assumed it was a routine inmate transfer. Night moves happened often to avoid attention. Inside the van, the escapees rode an adrenaline high, but reality soon hit. They were driving a prison vehicle that could get them caught. They argued about what to do next. One suggested hiding the van in a forest, covering it with branches, but time was short. They reached a small town called Winton. Outside town, they found a secluded spot near trees. They parked the van, abandoned it, and split into 2 groups. Group 1, the Briley brothers and Willie Jones. Group 2, Earl Clanton and Derek Peterson. The first group ran through the trees until they reached a residential area. They spotted clothes hanging on a line behind a house. Quickly, they changed out of prison uniforms into civilian clothes. By then, nearly 3.5 hours had passed since the escape. Police discovered the abandoned van about 50 kilometers from the prison, far outside the original search zone. Inside, they found the riot gear and equipment that changed everything. The search area expanded massively. Jurisdiction shifted. The FBI took over. Authorities now believed the fugitives had split up, a smart move to avoid capture together. Search teams fanned out across the region. The 2 officers studied maps, calculated distances, predicted routes. At the same time, police began investigating the fugitives' families and associates, hoping for a lead. A public alert went out statewide. As the search intensified, so did fear. In Winton, residents woke to roadblocks and helicopters. News reports warned of 6 convicted killers on the run. People panicked. Gun stores sold out. Homes were barricaded. Some stayed awake all night, weapons nearby. Others refused to open their doors, even to police, afraid the escapees might be impersonating officers. Emergency lines flooded with calls. Every suspicious person, every strange car, every odd noise was reported. Police were overwhelmed. The fear was so thick that even officers had trouble convincing people to open their doors during checks. Later that day, around 5 p.m., 2 men were spotted walking calmly through Winton in broad daylight. Earl Clanton and Derek Peterson. They walked as if they belonged, entered a laundromat to eat and rest, but fate turned against them. A patrol officer from a special response unit drove by. He noticed something. The jacket one man wore looked exactly like a prison uniform jacket. The officer turned his car around and approached. Inside the laundromat, he drew his weapon. Hands up. They complied. Their escape had lasted less than 24 hours. The arrest was captured on camera. Footage later aired on TV, a chilling reminder of how close they'd come to vanishing. 2 were caught, but the most dangerous ones, the Briley brothers, were still free. Police knew they were capable of killing again without hesitation. Search operations intensified further. Roadblocks expanded. Surveillance increased. Every tip was chased. Fear across the region deepened, because now everyone knew the most violent of the six were still out there. And no one knew where they'd strike next. Most civilians avoided the area entirely. Investigators had to change tactics. They focused on the families. The FBI reviewed every phone number the Briley brothers had used in prison. At first, the records seemed useless. Random names, fake contacts that raised suspicion. The brothers had given false information to hide their real connections. So the FBI went straight to the phone company. One name appeared again and again. Their uncle. Instead of approaching him directly, risking a tip-off, agents decided to watch him. They believed if the brothers were alive, they'd contact him eventually. For days, agents followed his movements, watching everywhere he went. While the FBI watched the uncle, another break came. Two fugitives, Lem Tuggle and Willie Jones, had fled toward Vermont, hoping to cross into Canada. They hid in forests, slept outdoors, survived on little. But their stolen pickup truck was running out of fuel. That truck, blue with a distinct mark on the back, had already been reported. Desperate, Tuggle left Jones in the woods and drove to a nearby town. He entered a gift shop, pulled a knife, and robbed the owner for cash. She later described the truck and plate number to police. That detail changed everything. Police identified the truck and began searching nearby roads. A patrol officer spotted it driving the opposite direction, made a U-turn, and followed. Another officer moved ahead and blocked the road. Trapped between two patrol cars, Tuggle stopped. He was arrested without resistance. Later, he admitted he'd been trying to reach Canada just kilometers away, unaware he'd almost made it. The next day, police received a call that stunned them. A man's calm voice said, "My name is Willie Jones. I escaped from prison. I want to turn myself in." Officers traced the call and found him standing alone by the roadside. He offered no resistance. When questioned, he admitted he'd been hiding in the forest, starving, exhausted, terrified. He'd lost contact with the others, and finally gave up. He was arrested without incident. Now only the Briley brothers remained. Investigators intensified surveillance on their uncle. Days passed, then a break. A woman reported that James Briley had contacted her. Tracing the call led to a small auto shop. Undercover officers watched the location. Soon 2 men matching the brothers' descriptions were seen working there. An undercover officer approached, spoke casually, and confirmed their identities. That evening, police moved in. The building was surrounded. Officers stormed inside, weapons drawn, everyone on the ground.
In the evening, police moved in. The shop was surrounded. Officers stormed inside, weapons drawn.
Now, the Briley brothers froze. For the first time since their escape, they had nowhere to run. They were arrested without resistance. All 6 escapes were back in custody. Because of the severity of the breach, authorities took extreme measures. The prison was locked down. Guards were fired. Procedures were completely overhauled. The state moved swiftly to carry out the death sentences. One by one, each man involved in the escape was executed, some by electric chair, others by lethal injection. The Mecklenburg escape, one of the most infamous in American prison history, changed the system forever. Security was tightened nationwide, protocols were rewritten, training intensified, and the prison where it all began would never be the same again.